pollution sources due to these credits that they were moving around. What was it or is, and in low-income communities, low-income communities of color, and in this case, the Latinos on the most part. And so, there's a huge problem that is, I think, very many times overlooked, and it has to do with cumulative health impacts. So we talk about reducing pollution, and perhaps regionally it goes down a few percentage points, but in very specific communities of color, low-income communities that are already having the challenge of, well, with not having access to health care or a living wage due to the nature of the agricultural business and many other problems, are having to deal with the biggest burden of pollution. So, it goes down, say, a few percentage points regionally, it goes up 100% in specific local communities. So, I guess it's more of a statement, but I definitely would like to hear people's feedback in terms of their vision on how that would be attended to and reduced and start to take away those burdens from communities that are at least capable of dealing with them.
I can give an answer. Thanks, Ray. I really appreciate hearing that. And I mean, I completely agree on two fronts. In terms of cumulative burden of these communities, we do think it's really important to address that. And one of the things that both Karen and Syed said was, this focus on multi-pollutant strategy. I think part of that is to be smart about the controls, but part of it is to acknowledge the, on a very small scale, at least that there are multiple air pollutants that people are being exposed to first and foremost. But let's broaden that a little bit, and there is a recognition, certainly in the standard setting, but across our rules, we're starting to do analysis of, look at the disproportionate burdens or benefits of the rules, and look at communities that are cumulatively impacted both in terms of they're already so heavily burdened, not just by air pollutants, but by everything, but also potentially vulnerable. I mean, I talked about socioeconomic status measures like low educational attainment, which makes it a lot harder to know how to avoid asthma triggers or get access to healthcare and things like that. So completely agree, and I think as scientists across the board at all of our agencies are really making a push to find out where we have latitude under our authority for the Clean Air Act to really take that information into account to make smart decisions. So I think there's also one other aspect I'd like to highlight, which is I think we need to be a little bit humble. We have our mandate under the Clean Air Act and we have our regulatory authority. I think we also have to do a good job of being out in the communities, talking to them and understanding your perspective and your reality, your burdens. So, we're getting better and we're admittedly not great at it. And I'll say that from EPA's perspective because we're even farther removed. But there is definitely a push and acknowledgement of that. So I appreciate you bringing it up.
I just wanted to add, in addition to what Matt said, I think there also has been a move by EPA just in the standard setting process itself to be looking at more and more near source kinds of exposures. I mean, we've seen it with the lead standard, the NO2 standard, now the recently released SO2 standard that's really looking at near source exposures and having to design your control program around those. And so hopefully that will also help facilitate us doing a better job at looking at localized community impacts as well as the broader regional impacts.
Can I add one thing just to what Karen said? I'm sorry to cut you off. For those who don't know, when we put out the latest NO2 National Ambient Air Quality Standard, we did put a requirement for new NO2 monitoring near roadways or near, and we specifically highlighted, the administrator specifically highlighted, I think it was 41 monitors in particularly vulnerable communities. And that's that acknowledgement of cumulative burden. NO2 is linked to asthma, but also, there's these hotspot type impacts. So I do think that's the direction we're headed. I think there's, I think it was Syed asked the question and John Balms responded about, there's still concerns about not having the science necessarily to know how to set a standard in that environment, but for 24-hour PM 2.5, we do look near source. So I think that is the trend and we are acknowledging. So I really appreciate Karen for bringing that up.
Dr. Pinkerton.
Oh, you're cut off by your staff.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to
give one more advice to Ray Leon. I know he always takes my advice very seriously. But yeah, I totally agree with what Matt and Karen said. But it's also, in this whole exercise of translating science to good policy, especially in the light of all these very difficult challenges that we face, we really need to go back to good, sound science as opposed to just engaging in rhetoric. And what I know some of my friends in the environmental community, just one or two, not very many, I don't want to lump them together, but sometimes they get really nervous when we talk about improvements in air quality. That, well, you should not even talk about improvements in air quality because that then, takes the political will away to do what is needed. But I disagree with that, in that I think it's important to point to the progress that has been made and things that have worked, if you want more of those things to be done in the future. Our rough estimate is that in the last 25 years in San Joaquin Valley, both for mobile sources and stationary sources, we've spent about $40 billion on reducing emissions. We've reduced stationary source emissions by 80%, mobile source emissions by about 40%, and we're seeing improvement. If I went to the business community and I say, well, that $40 billion that you guys already spent really didn't do anything, but let's spend another $40 or $20 billion. That's not going to get us very far. So I'd like to urge people to give the credit when it's due, acknowledge the work that the business community has done and the investments that they have made, knowing full well that based on everything we've seen, all these graphs and charts, there is no mission accomplished sign up here that we say we're done, we're going home. We still have a major challenge ahead of us, and I don't think anyone should be threatened by pointing to improvements, and I think it can only help us ask for more if we say that things that we've done have actually worked.
As a basic scientist, I very much appreciate hearing a lot about the policy and just the challenges that you face, but also the challenges we face in providing solid information to you. And I think one of the biggest challenges is the fact that we don't live in a single pollutant world. And as you mentioned, the multi-pollutant issues are pretty monumental. And how do you look at this from the perspective of ranking of criteria pollutants? It seems as though we're always putting PM at the top of our list, but is that actually true? And what about climate change? What about the greenhouse gases? How can we formulate a policy that might address these issues in the most effective manner?
Just starting from the bottom of the food chain, as a local agency here, we obviously have to abide by all the state and federal mandates that are before us, but at the local air district, my board has taken a position that public health supersedes climate change. So whenever we have to deal with that trade-off, we will defer to public health, immediate public health. But we're always looking for win-win opportunities, and there are quite a few of those that hopefully we can take on. PM, based on everything that we hear, both in terms of the health impact, the economic impact related to health, the PM seems to be more important, but unfortunately, we have not been able to convince EPA to really move off of the mass-based PM standard, where all PM is treated the same, all PM 2.5 is treated the same. In the Valley, we have a major component of our PM being ammonium nitrates, which everything that I've read shows that it's not that detrimental as compared to diesel particulates, the ultrafine particulates, and some of the other toxic components of PM. But right now, PM 2.5, everything counts the same. We're hoping that even though we're not able to convince EPA to have a different standard, at least in prioritizing our measures in our plan and focusing our resources to initially go after things that are more critical based on the scientific evidence that we see for, based on size as well as chemical composition, see if there are some measures that we could target on sources that lead to those emissions or regions that have those sort of pollutants. So But I'm hoping someday EPA will take that into account.